So I wanted to use an image that I felt was deeply flawed, and the image I picked was perfect for that. So um, this picture is of a conservative and mask vaccine protest, according to WND News. The person holding the sign is using the commonly known Dr. Seuss language to get his point across. Dr. Seuss language has always been closely associated with children and kids, and Dr. Seuss picture books are supposed to teach kids valuable life lessons, according to lifehack.com. There was 11 ways in which this website saw Dr. Seuss teach valuable life lessons, but it's mostly seen in most of his picture books. Recently, however, the books have been scrutinized for the misappropriation of different ethnicities. I saw this on a NBC News article, but it was also super prevalent in the news, and unless you don't watch the news, it was hard to miss this. So back to my main argument that this man in the poster at the very forefront holding this Dr. Seuss poster is convincing children to accept Dr. Seuss's harmful misappropriation of Asians. The design is very clear. The poster's design is important because everything relates to Dr. Seuss. The font he uses on the poster is very specific to Dr. Seuss's famous font. If you look at this image right here on fontspace.com and look at it side by side to the poster, it is very clear that he intended to use the same font. The cat on the left is from the famous picture book, The Cat in the Hat. And then he also uses the repetition of "I will not" in a direct reference to the Dr. Seuss's children's book, Green Eggs and Ham. The rhyme scheme from Dr. Seuss is the same, as he rhymes every word of the last lines. For example, chin and in, place and face, ear and fear. So obviously everything he did with this poster is specifically designed to reference Dr. Seuss. Now to the audience. The person with the poster is a anti-mask protester, obviously. His intended audience is for children. There were no children at this protest, to my knowledge. I looked at the pictures from that day of all the protesters. There were no children, but that doesn't matter because the audience who was not present is still for or families with young children who weren't protesting. Obviously, these families aren't going to bring young kids to a protest, but it is clear the language and the images were specifically targeted towards them. And then the audience this is meant for, but this isn't meant for, is for those who haven't read or heard of Dr. Seuss. The language he uses is very easy to read and playful, which is super intent. The goal is for young kids to immediately recognize and accept his poster. The same way that Dr. Seuss ingrains life lessons to young kids, he intends to ingrain into kids that masks are un-American. It is hard to ignore this gold chain that the man is wearing in the poster. It is supposed to represent that he embodies family values, and which is to the targeted audience of families with young kids, or specifically kids. And then when families see this, he wants to give off a look that he holds a higher moral standard, which is pretty ironic because Christians are supposed to love thy neighbor as thyself. But Dr. Seuss made cartoons about Asians in internment camps, which inherently ostracizes them and doesn't love thy neighbor as thyself. Actually, it is a very hateful connotation towards Asians. So this image that I just put on the screen is of the cartoon honorable fifth column. It is depicts a Dr. Seuss cartoon that puts Asians in a very comical, hateful way. The history behind it is this was during the time of the Japanese internment, according to NBC News, and portrays hateful sentiments towards Japanese. Dr. Seuss is therefore ingraining kids to see different races in a specific stereotyped way. This is highly important because a lot of American kids who are the targeted audience for these books don't know a lot about the Asian culture or many Asians themselves. Going back to the first image, the protester is praising Dr. Seuss and confirming he wants to use him as the forefront to convey his message. Here's another image, again, hateful towards Asians. This 1937 book is called and To Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street. It depicts Asians again in a very stereotypical way, with chopsticks, and then the Asian hat, and then also to add on, they call a Chinese man in the cartoon Chinaman, which is obviously very very condescending and not very kind way to put Asians in this sort of light. And then the man has very little to no eyes, depicted as very unflattering. So these stereotypes again seem small, but it creates unwanted personality traits for Asians and in a mediated way for Americans to make fun of the way Asians look. Another harmful outcome is Asian Americans who are born in the U.S. But have to deal with these negative stereotypes. Again, if there's a Asian who was born in America and is in one of these kids' classes, he's gonna have to deal with these negative stereotypes, which is very unfair. And that's why Dr. Seuss should be scrutinized, which he was, about these very negative stereotypes towards Asians. All this goes to teach kids that these Asians are different, and we should treat them as such, almost ostracizing them from the society. The American flags are very hard to ignore. There's so many of them in this image. The protesters try and use the amount of USA flags to convince people that they represent good American values. This is further contradicted because those old ingrained values also contain a lot of racism and stereotyping too. The goal is to say they are more American because they have a lot of pride for the flag, but these references to Dr. Seuss therefore stacks on that America, the flag, and his books are all a part of American values, which are inherently all misappropriated because everyone knows the history of America. The flag is not perfect, and there's even a lot of scrutiny today with the kneeling of the NFL players with the flag. It is hard to ignore the lack of diversity in this crowd. The people who support these values and this movement don't seem to be diverse. They seem to be all white. The man deciding to bring his support for Dr. Seuss to an all-white protest fits in perfectly. It is almost as if these people are proud to be white, and anything that ostracizes other races, such as Dr. Seuss, they hop on and say it is American and represents the American values. The man to the right, some of y'all might not know what flag this is. This is called the Green Mountain Boys flag. This flag was for the militiamen in New Hampshire territory during the Revolutionary War, and contains the 13 stars for the 13 colonies according to Revolutionary War and Beyond. This flag is for sale. And the flag is intended to make protesters look like revolutionists in a glorifying way, almost comparing it to the colonists, like they're revolutionary because they're helping stop cancel culture or show that they're more American with this Dr. Seuss poster. But this is teaching kids that Dr. Seuss is revolutionary and comparing the fight for independence of our country to the fight to save Dr. Seuss from being canceled, which is super not a fair way of explaining things. The no shirt of the person holding the poster is important because this is teaching kids to be a rebel and not accepting what their parents tell them to do. The problem is that they teach kids to also think that it is not okay to listen to their teacher when they start making playful jokes at Asians, which Dr. Seuss teaches them to do. In conclusion, kids will see this and be exposed to harmful politics. Instead of growing up in 2021 and finally teaching kids to accept and love other classmates, they will, from different backgrounds, it will once again divide them. Kids in 2021 should not be taught harmful stereotypes, but they should be taught that stereotypes are not okay, and to ensure a more loving and accepting future. Thank you.